My name is Sebastian Faber. I'm the chair of the Board of Governors of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives. Thank you all for coming. We have a really terrific program for you today. But before we get started, I want to recognize Rachael Lorenzo, co-founder and executive director of Indigenous Women Rising, the organization that received last year's ALBA Puffin Award. Rachael will lead us in an invocation and land acknowledgement. Help me welcome Rachael, please.
If you're able to, please stand. Wemisha naya naishtia gatsna kupishtaya teyu dawanya tikana duma the trutseshe mayuna shrota dawak hanuk ganishe dawak na tayu ganishe dawak na shpi ganishe dashkawan tsutse bamashutiwa tutu shrashe wishtiani winataani shortuni hinowich amuachamani tinyachamani iani bashruachamani iani tutsernishe bawastrami benati betawachani hea washka awana dondaku dape teketixtiu botiu tiu satiu shta na tukataka shashrani. Thank you. Please be seated. Goatsi Hopa. I'm Rachael Lorenzo. I'm from the Mescalero Apache tribe and the Pueblo of Laguna, both based in New Mexico. Before we get to the awards part, we must recognize where we are physically. We are on stolen Mohican and Lenape land. We can acknowledge that fact all we want, but land acknowledgements only benefit us here in this room. Because we are present on this stolen land. I humbly ask that you redistribute your resources to the aging and disabled services, cultural services, education services, health programs, housing support, or natural resource management programs. Any of the programs of the Delaware Tribe of Indians, Mohican tribes, Munsee tribes, and the Lecawe tribes. There are so many others that call this part of the so-called United States home, and they transcend state borders. These groups have such intimate knowledge about this land, and that knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. Their connection to place is something that no one here can ever understand or wrap their minds around. And I know this because I'm Indigenous too. I know this is true because no one here could ever understand or wrap their minds around my connection or my colleague Mallory's connection to our own lands in New Mexico at Laguna and Acoma Pueblos. Land acknowledgements are useless without action. So again, I ask that you look to where you call home and redistribute what you're able to tribes who steward your lands. 80% of the globe's biosphere is protected by 10% of the global population of indigenous people. Every natural disaster or naturally occurring thing can be explained or guarded against by indigenous people. For example, the state of California banned fire ceremonies by tribes in California, and it wasn't until the terrible fires that displaced thousands of people from their homes that indigenous people were consulted about how to contain these deadly fires. So not only am I asking for a redistribution of resources, but also a redistribution of power in order to halt the fast-growing fascism we see in this country. We all play a part in fascism in some way, but until we redistribute power and resources, we will not know a future of safety or abundance. That being said, many thanks, so many thanks to ALBA and the Puffin Foundation. We would not have been able to continue our work and model what effective Indigenous leadership looks like without y'all. Now let's get started on centering this year's awardee, 18 by vote, and hear from ALBA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that moving speech and invocation. It's like I said, it's so great to be back here. It's my first time back in New York for an ALBA event since before the pandemic. And it's really weird to meet people that I've been Zooming with for a long time in person and realize how tall or short they are. I want to thank everybody who's made this event possible. In the first place, the Puffin Foundation, led by Neal Rosenstein, which has been granting this $100,000 award yearly since 2010, when Perry Rosenstein conceived it. I want to thank the ALBA staff, including Mark Wallem, Dennis Meany, Marina Mikhailova, and Rachel Millman, and of course La Nacional, the space we are in here, our hosts today on West 14th Street in what is the oldest Spanish cultural institution in the United States. It's quite something. I also thank Peter Miller and his crew for filming this event. So that everybody who cannot be here in person today can still see what it was like. And being together in a moment like this is always a really good opportunity to remember those from our community that we lost since we last gathered a year ago. I'm going to name some names of the people that we know we lost, and I'm going to invite everybody in the audience to add names if they feel so inclined, and then we'll move to a quick moment of silence to remember them. Nomi Rucker, Helene Sussman, Mike Nussbaum, Dan Bessie, Nora Chase, and Maya Khan. Do you have any other names of people that we lost? Susanna Doyle, Francisco Pancho Soberon. Let's observe a moment of silence in their memory. Thank you. Before I hand over the microphone, I want to acknowledge some other people in the audience. We have several previous award winners with us today, which is amazing. And Kate Doyle, who herself is a previous award winner, as well as a former board member and former chair of the board, will talk more about them in a little bit. We also have members of the ALBA board in the audience. Fellow board members, can you please stand for a second so we can acknowledge you? I've been chair of the board off and on for, well, since 2010, for a long time, and I can't tell you how amazing it is to work with these ALBA board members. They're all a little bit quirky, but they're really, really great people to work with. I'm not saying that I'm not quirky. and ALBA wouldn't exist without the hard work of everybody on the board. And as always, we're deeply honored to be in the presence of family members of the Lincoln veterans, of the volunteers who left from the United States to fight fascism in Spain. So could the family members of the Lincoln Brigade volunteers please stand as well? Today we are here to celebrate the work, the amazing work done by 18 by Vote, this year's awardee, about whom you'll hear much more in a moment. But as chair of ALBA, I don't want to miss this opportunity to urge everybody to register for voting and to actually vote, and to do the same with everybody around you, young and old. This is going to be a very important election, as we know, and not voting is the worst thing we can do. As many of you know, the ALBA, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, is an educational nonprofit that was founded in the late 1970s. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary in a couple of years. To help keep alive the memory and to help preserve the archive of the close to 3,000 volunteers who left from US soil to fight fascism in Spain, about 800 of whom died doing that in Spain. Today, ALBA fulfills that mission through in-person and online events, through our quarterly magazine, many of you have copies of those or get it at home, The Volunteer, Through workshops with teachers of elementary, middle, and high school and college, and a website with many, many resources, including a massive biographical database that is used every day by researchers, by students, and by family members all over the world. None of this work would be possible without your support, without the support of our thousands of donors who faithfully help make this, all our activities possible and help finance that. So as good chair of an amazing nonprofit, I must tell you that should you feel inclined to donate to ALBA and help support our work, you can do so by scanning one of the QR codes that are up front, or just putting money in one of the baskets or buckets that we have for that purpose there. So thank you so much for your ongoing support. I'm going to leave it here and hand it over to our own Brooklyn-born David Persard, who is a graduate of Hunter College, a former student of our board member Maria Hernandez Ojeda, but who is currently finishing up his PhD at Brown University in Hispanic Studies. And David, among other things, as well as being a great person, is also our youngest and newest ALBA board member. So I'm going to call him up in a second. After David, Kate Doyle is going to speak. Kate is a former board member, a former chair, and a former award recipient. She's also senior analyst of US policy in Latin America at the National Security Archive, which is an amazing organization in Washington, DC, that, among other things, has spent decades digging through, or declassifying and then digging through declassified documents of the US government in order to help us understand the specifics and the effects of state violence in Latin America and other places. Kate received the ALBA Puffin Award back in 2012 for her tireless work as a journalist and researcher to uncover state crimes often conducted with US complicity in Latin America, specifically Guatemala and Mexico. But first, help me welcome David Persard.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to present a tribute to the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade and some of the work that they have done with regards to voting rights and also the fight for civil rights in the United States. I fought the good fight, St. Paul famously wrote in a letter to his companion Timothy. I have run the race, and I have kept the faith. The volunteers of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade certainly fought the good fight against fascism in Spain. They endeavored, as it were, upon their return to the United States, to keep the same faith that first drove them to the shores of the Iberian Peninsula. Yet, their homecoming was rife with difficulties. In the first, the victory of Franco over the Republican forces, as well as the fate of the conquered, was a source of great grief for the volunteers. Neither were they met with a warm welcome once they had come stateside. Some had their passports seized by government authorities. Others faced discrimination and political harassment. Some even were the targets of politically motivated attacks. Nevertheless, despite being hard-pressed on all sides, the spirit of the veterans was never destroyed. Rather, many of them strove to continue the battle at home, particularly in the realm of both civil rights and voters' rights. Presently, we will highlight the efforts of some of the veterans of the brigade. Back in the United States, the New York native Abe Osheroff involved himself in various civil rights projects. In the South, he participated in the Freedom Summer Campaign, whose goal was to register as many African American voters as possible in Mississippi. In Mileston, Osheroff formed part of the armed guard stationed at the residence of Hartman Turnbow, one of the most important members of the Black freedom struggle movement. There, along with his comrades, Osheroff defended Turnbow's property in 24-hour armed watches. Outside of the confines, however, of the American South, this veteran's convictions also led him to carry out various activities in New York, Los Angeles, and Nicaragua. He helped to organize unions as well as build houses. Similar to the activities of Abe Osheroff were those of the New York nurtured nurse, Ruth Davidow. Davidow had gone to Spain as a nurse in protest of President Roosevelt's policy of non-intervention. However, once back on American soil, Davidow likewise sojourned to Mississippi, where she advocated for adequate health care. As the 60s then came to a close, David-Al found herself traveling to other parts of the country. She applied her nursing expertise, for example, on Alcatraz Island, as well as in San Francisco, where she helped organize for the homeless, as well as for AIDS patients. Connected also to the fight for civil rights and voting rights was James Yates, himself a Mississippi native. Yates left the South for New York in search of work, from where he passed on to Spain to also fight against fascism. Yet, once back in the United States, Yates would become involved with the NAACP. Eventually, in 1964, he even came to be president of the Greenwich Village chapter of the organization, a position he used to aid the natives of Mississippi by sending food and clothes to those enmeshed in the battle for voting rights. Moreover, Yates also saw to combating racial inequality while in New York. He was particularly interested in fighting against the segregation of the school system. The rights activism of the Lincoln Brigade veterans, however, was not only limited to the East Coast. On the opposite end of the country, California native Delmer Berg carried the banner of civil rights. After returning from Spain, Berg would go on to be drafted into World War II. Yet this was not enough to stifle his spirit. Until the end of his life, Berg never slacked the reins. Rather, he found himself participating in various activist groups. Among others, he was involved with the United Farm Workers, the Democratic Club, as well as with the NAACP. He was particularly involved in fighting for the rights of farm workers, as well as against racial injustice. The former, however, seems to have been his most important and salient work. The government authorities took a special interest in him due to his work with these farmers, closely monitoring his movements during the 1960s. Although we've offered here but a very brief sketch of the activities of 3 veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, it ought not to be forgotten that many other veterans, while stateside, also participated in the fight for civil and voting rights. 12 veterans, for example, in 1965, as Mo Fishman would recall, marched beneath the VALB banner in support of voting rights in Selma, Alabama. Fishman, of course, was neither one himself to remain on the sidelines idle. Many years after his return from Spain, Fishman would find himself at the head of VALB's activist activities. He took a keen interest in aiding the refugees fleeing from Francoist Spain, raising money for political prisoners as well as for their families. Moreover, he was also involved in fundraising activities in solidarity with the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua. Such was his commitment to activism that even in old age, he could never be tired. He often participated in protests and in demonstrations, albeit sometimes seated on the sidelines. Refusing then always to rest on their laurels, the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade fought the good fight in Spain, and they kept the faith once they returned to the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was amazing. And hello. It's really nice to be here. It's like being back home. I also haven't been physically in the presence of ALBA and all the community of ALBA since before the pandemic. So it's really, really nice to be in this space physically. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means, what it feels like to get this extraordinary Human Rights Award from ALBA and the Puffin Foundation. Because there's just a few of us over the last 14 years who have had the honor and the privilege of being recipients of this award. And I think it's important before we bestow it on our next recipient and our next organization that we focus a little bit on what this award is and what it means to those of us who work on human rights. And thinking about that, I was thinking about what it means to be seen, to see and be seen. What it means to see and be seen. Because a lot of us work in the dark, both figuratively, anonymously, and literally. My own work, as Sebastian talked about, brings me into archives, physical archives that are often in basements, in windowless spaces. Sometimes there are archives that are full of rotting, decaying records that we work through and we read and we analyze to try to pull out information and evidence against human rights crimes. We literally work in the dark, and so many of us in the work that we do work literally or figuratively in the dark without being seen. But first, what is it to see? I love this award because it is about vision. First, it's about the vision, the ability to see of these organizations that know that we have work to do to make our society right. And they see beyond the despair that we all feel often living these lives today, especially in this era that we're in. They see beyond that, and they see towards hope, and they see towards optimism, and they see towards a fight that we can do and we can win. There's also vision, of course, in creating this award and the endowment that went into it, and bestowing it on these organizations. And that vision is an integral part of why we're here today, because we need people like the Rosenstein family, like the Puffin Foundation, like the late great Perry, like Neal, and like Gladys, who isn't physically here, but I know she's watching. All of them. We need your vision because it helps us continue our work. Let's just think for a second of what are some of the groups that have received this amazing, astonishing award. We have Rachael and Mallory here from the Indigenous Women's Rising, who fight for Native and Indigenous women's access to health services, health care, health education, reproductive rights. We gave the award 2 years ago to Life After Hate, an organization that was able to see the humanity in people who had been lost in bigotry and hate, and insist on their capacity to change. We gave it the year before that to My Brother's Keeper, an organization based in Mississippi that works tirelessly for the prevention, treatment, and care, first of the queer and trans community, those affected by HIV, but that organization has blossomed over the years into serving the physical and emotional health of a much broader community of underserved, underinsured, or uninsured, and unseen brothers and sisters in Mississippi. And we're so lucky today to have June Gibson and her colleague Brandon, who are here in the house, and we can say hello and give them some applause. Hi, June, Brandon. They came all the way from Mississippi via San Francisco, so, you know, we're really, really glad to have you here and to be able to honor you again. We also have someone from No More Deaths, who was the recipient before My Brother's Keeper. No More Deaths is an organization based in Arizona that provides humanitarian assistance for migrants crossing the border into that deadly desert land of the southern United States, and provides assistance in the form of water, food, attention, health services, and has been doing this despite a ferocious pushback from the United States government, and particularly, of course, the Border Patrol, Customs, and Immigration Service. We're lucky to have Sammy DiDonato. I don't know where Sammy is. I don't have my glasses on. There's Sammy way in the back. Hello, Sammy, from No More Deaths. Really great to have you here also. I will just mention that last night I was at the opening, very first screening, the US premiere, maybe the world premiere, of a documentary film called Borderland, The Line Within, which is a documentary that was directed by Pamela Yates, who is sitting in the third row over there, and produced by Paco de Onis, who's one of our board members. And it was a wonderful film. Congratulations, you guys. I mention that not just because they happen to be looking at me and they're here, and Paco's on the board, but because No More Deaths figures, it plays a very central role in this film, in talking about ways in which people have fought back against not just the indifference, but the deadly attack on the part of the US government against people trying to find better lives in this country. It's a beautiful film, I highly recommend it. And congratulations to No More Deaths for the work that you have done. We've given this film we've given this award to journalists, to dreamers, to farm workers, to immigration lawyers. We've given it to people who go out into the open Mediterranean Sea and rescue refugees who are in sinking boats. We've given it to Brian Stevenson, who fights for racial justice and equality in the South. And our very first award, going all the way back, in 2010, we gave it to Baltasar Garzón, a Spanish judge who was the one, even if you've never heard that name and don't know anything about him, you know this. He was the one who indicted Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet in Spain while Pinochet was visiting Margaret Thatcher in London, and actually caused Pinochet's arrest and detention for almost a year, or perhaps even over a year, for a criminal case, a human rights case that he had developed in Spain with Chilean and Argentine human rights activists. So that is the legacy of the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Award. To be an organization that is actually given this honor is to be pulled into a community and associated with one of the great radical acts of the last century, the decision of thousands, tens of thousands, of international anti-fascists to volunteer themselves, their bodies, to defend a free Spain. And I think we all feel so privileged to be associated with that legacy. What does it mean to be seen by this honor? Your recognition gives us motivation. It encourages us, it animates us, gives us community, gives us a kind of radical optimism that, yeah, we can do this, we can go on. Somebody has seen us. It associates us with those volunteers from this long, long past, this honorable past, and also with all the visionaries and human rights defenders that come before us who can see a future despite the world we live in today. Thank you for that, and on with the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kate, for really illustrating and illuminating the legacy. It's really great to hear about that. Thank you all for being here. It's great to be with fellow board members, human rights committee members, and incredible organizations who are doing this essential work. My name is Jack Meyerhofer, and I am a board member at ALBA, and I'm the current chair of the Human Rights Committee. And I have the great pleasure of working with our generous partners at the Puffin Foundation to help support these incredible organizations that we're about to hear from today, and that are also here in the room today. So please allow me just a minute to introduce our next two speakers. We have first Rachael Lorenzo. Rachael is the founder and executive director of Indigenous Women Rising, an Indigenous-led and Indigenous-centered reproductive health organization based in New Mexico. Rachael and their staff fundraise to help Indigenous relatives pay for sexual and reproductive health nationwide. And very importantly, Rachael is also obsessed with cats. The other speaker who'll be joining us is Ava Mateo. Ava is the president of this year's recipient for the award, 18 by Vote. She's been recognized as a leader on innovative methods of youth civic engagement by the Aspen Institute, the Biden administration, Circle at Tufts, and more. In her leadership at 18 by Vote, Ava leads an entirely youth-led team in the development and execution of hyper-localized youth voter outreach programming. 18 by Vote's programming supports paid youth participants in becoming catalysts for civic action within their own communities. After studying at Sarah Lawrence College for her undergraduate degree, Ava received a master's in sociology and education with a concentration in education policy from Columbia University. Her research was focused on the influence of youth-led organizations and youth educational programs on youth participants' socio-political identity development. I know that we're in for a great treat with the conversation that we're about to have, so please join me in welcoming Rachael and Ava up to the stage.
Thank you, Dennis. Awesome. Well, it's so exciting to be here in conversation with Rachael. I'm so honored to be this year's recipient of the ALBA Puffin Award for Human Rights Activism. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm honored to be joined with you in the work that you were doing, and I'm so excited to talk about the ways in which really the thing that we wanted to talk about today is how important it is to think about activism broadly and to think about, what it means to be civically engaged, what it means to be an organizer. So I'm going to ask you a question, Rachael, if that's okay to get us started in this conversation. And the thing that I really love thinking about, and with the work that we do at 18 by Vote, which I'll speak a little bit more about throughout this conversation as well as later, is really thinking about what it means to be a change maker and what it means to take action. And so I would love to hear your perspective, Rachael, on what is your philosophy of change making?
Change making can be done by anyone. I am very much of the belief that you don't need a college education or formal education to be a change maker. You just have to really genuinely care about an issue and accept that not everyone's going to agree with you, not everyone's going to like your approach, but know that every single person has a place in change making, in organizing. We're at Indigenous Women Rising, we're very much about liberation and body sovereignty and land back. That doesn't mean non-natives don't belong here. That means everyone has a place and everyone has a role to play in the stewardship of our resources and caretaking of each other, that we have an obligation to each other to care for each other. And part of that is recognizing where we can grow and where our strengths are, and using those strengths to be brave enough to want to create change and rock the boat.
I love that. And I think the idea of braveness is something, and courage when it comes to change making is something that I've been talking a lot about, because I think that it's really important to know that sometimes making change or calling for change can be a brave act, but I think it also is something that we need to do, we need everyone to be a part of. And so even if maybe you don't feel so brave or so courageous, that every act is a courageous act, and when you're in a change-making space. And we were talking a little bit about intergenerational work. 18 by Vote is a youth-led organization, but our board is intergenerational, and the work that we do over the past couple of years has been very focused on working with young people solely. And it has not been an intersectional, intergenerational necessarily in our actual work. And this year I've kind of come to a point where I've realized that really to create the world that we want to live in, we need to work intergenerationally. And I'm curious your thoughts on that as well.
As a Pueblo and Apache person, it's necessary to make everything intergenerational. One of the things that I love about the work that we do is the community agreements. One of them that always pops up in our work is No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. And that is very true in my community, which is divided up by clans and villages, and that every clan has its role. Every village is known for something, for contributing. And it's elders, it's young adults, it's young children. Very briefly, when our babies are born and they have the soft spot on their skull, we believe that that is the opening from which our mother can communicate with our young ones to give them knowledge, to help them retain the language, and get them ready to be part of the community that they were born into. And it is through elders that information is being given, and so it's very cyclical. So I don't think any effective campaign can exist without being intergenerational, because while young people have all of the brilliant ideas, we also have a lot to learn from elders and from folks who have done it to hopefully not make the same mistakes or change a strategy or something, and learn how to bridge that gap. Because again, I really don't think we can have effective campaigns without each other.
I love that, and it's so interesting. We 18 by Vote held a entirely youth-led research fellowship this past year, where we had actually 6 fellows from from 6 states actually, where they conducted completely youth-led. They were between the ages of 16 to 21, mixed methods research on kind of what were the things that were motivating young people to be civically engaged, and also demotivating. And really thinking about, what does it mean to support a young person in their civic engagement journey and in their activist or advocacy journey. And one of the biggest takeaways from that fellowship, and from they created a research report. If anyone's interested, it's on our website. It's called the I Research Report, and I'm sure I can share it with the community. The takeaways in general were incredibly rich, so community driven. But the thing that I thought of is that one of the biggest takeaways that they had, that this group of young people took from having countless conversations with people in their communities and young people in their communities, is that when you are making change, the most important thing to do is to recognize that everyone has expertise. So regardless of your age, regardless of your experience, regardless of your education, as you were talking about earlier, in order to really create spaces and communities of genuine, sustainable change making, it is critical to enter every room with that philosophy and that perspective.
I agree. Youth are the future.
I know, and it's so interesting. I think, in terms of voting and civic engagement, I'm curious, Rachel, how you think about in terms of the work that you do is in reproductive justice, and as I'm sure many people here know, that is one of the, 18 by Vote is a nonpartisan organization, but we are a youth-led youth voting organization, and the young people that we work with are very driven by the issues that they care about. This year we're moving into a campaign that's asking the question, what are you voting for? And really kind of thinking about, what is the thing that is getting you to the polls? Because young people aren't just showing up because they think they should. That's not the culture, and that's not what we're hearing from young people. We really, think about the issues that are bringing them, that personally affect them, that maybe they just have a connection to, that they want to be supporting. So I'm kind of curious how you think about that. I'm working in the reproductive justice space as it relates to civic engagement and voting.
As a radical indigenous queer, abolish the United States. I know that's not quite real life. I understand that.
We talked about this.
We did talk about it. That being said, every movement takes time. The thing with reproductive justice, reproductive health, especially what we're seeing in abortion access and with even midwifery care and the extremely high rates of maternal mortality amongst Black and Indigenous birthing folks, is pregnancy is one of the medical things that we go through that is so time sensitive, it cannot wait for policy. It cannot wait for the next election. It cannot wait for a primary election and who's going to be the best for reproductive health and justice. So my organization, frankly, doesn't do a whole lot of civic engagement because a lot of our callers, not that they don't care, but their needs are so immediate. They need to eat today. And so we're trying to find that balance of civic engagement and helping our relatives meet those needs because, again, not just pregnancy, but hunger, housing, clean water, those things cannot wait for the next election. And so being able to try to balance those things is difficult. That's not to say we don't keep track of elections. That's not to say we don't look at policy, that we don't track abortion laws from state to state, or what state laws say about licensed midwives versus certified nurse midwives, or what the federal government will or won't allow in Indian health services. It's very much a federal issue. So that's not to say we don't monitor those things, but we're still finding our balance, and it's going to take time.
I hear that. And I think that's, that the urgency of kind of the experiences of individuals is the thing that young people are consumed with. They are deeply consumed with the ways in which, the injustice, the actual access to basic needs is very front of mind. And so the thing that we've really focused on is, how do we help young people navigate that? How do we help them understand that, to us, civic, I think generally when people hear the word civic engagement, or the phrase civic engagement, you think voting, maybe protesting, maybe, contacting your representatives. But what we really do is focus on redefining what it means to be civically engaged and thinking of civic engagement as a process of change-making in which you use all of the systems in place, but you work within and outside of the system. And so it's using our system of democracy. It's using your vote, thinking of voting as a piece of the puzzle, but also, protesting. It means boycotting. It means doing a sit-in. It means contacting your representative. It means mutual aid. And so I think that I appreciate that you're thinking about that and working towards, I think it's something that young people in general are really recognizing, and I think we're at a kind of crucial point in our democracy right now of navigating that, where I think because of social media, I think because of just the ways in which people are getting exposure, I think, to situations that they didn't before, it is a critical time to really define what it means to be civically engaged. One other thing that I am thinking about, and then I think we can probably take some questions if anyone has any, is, I know that you spoke about engaging elders and really having that emphasis. Do you see, recognizing that, of course, young people are the future, and also abortion access, basic needs access is so critical to young people, and I think to Indigenous young people in disproportionately than many other populations. Do you have any advice for engaging not only, I think, for young people in general in an intergenerational way?
Some folks might disagree with me on this, and that's okay.
That's what we're here for.
That's the risk of being up here. No.
Dissent is important.
So, my mother-in-law works with us, and I love her. Neal Lorenzo, Cookie Lorenzo, I love you so much. She is a middle-aged Pueblo Maidu woman. She is coming up on 16 years of sobriety, and she has so much wisdom, so much experience, so many mistakes that she shared with me and with my children. And that does not negate those experiences, and everything don't negate how she's been able to contribute to our work, without a college degree, but having those experiences has made not only our relationship much more rich, but also recognizing, in the social justice world, there are a lot of buzzwords. And my mother-in-law she don't use those buzzwords. A lot of times she doesn't even know what they mean, and that's okay. I think meeting people where they are, no matter where they come from, what age they are, their background, they are not gonna have all of the words. They are not gonna have all of the politically correct terms, and so it's up to us to balance the intent versus impact of our words and understanding that, okay, yes, maybe the impact wasn't so great, and also understanding that not everyone comes from the same background, the same socioeconomic background, and so, like, I will give a brief example. My mother-in-law says female, and we know, a lot of us know the implications of using the term female, right? But it took a lot of listening to understand, active listening to understand where she was coming from, and then a conversation about why the term might or can be perceived as derogatory. And that conversation in and of itself was pretty hard to have. And so that's just one example of how we have seen intergenerational work or successful, is being able to meet people where they are and knowing that they really do want the best for us. But it's all, again, not one person knows everything, but together we know a lot. And so it's really about sharing information and being graceful.
I love that. And, I think that interestingly, we really, that's our approach, is meeting young people where they are. I think in the democracy space and in the voting space, people expect young people to come to them. Politicians expect young people to come to their offices to make their voices heard. They don't set up office hours in line with school schedules. They don't design spaces to include young people. And so what we do that is different is that we go to young people. So this year we're actually going to advocacy groups and working with them to register and activate their young people who are involved. There are so many young people who are involved in causes around the country and around the world, but they aren't being reached by the people that are trying to get out the vote. And so we're really focused on how do we reach people where they are? How do we meet young people where they're at? And so that really resonates with me. Thank you. And I was told we don't have time for questions. But it's been so lovely to speak with you, and I'm so honored to be sharing this space and this community with you.
Oh, no. You're No, Ava, I'm so inspired, and yeah, I just want to say I have so much hope listening to you, that even though our approaches might be different, that I think it feels good. You're on the right path, and I'm really excited about your future and the future of 18 by Vote. What an incredible organization that was chosen. Yes.
Thank you.
You can go to iwrising.org. You can follow us on social media, on the Instagrams, the Book of Faces, or Facebook. Share our things. Organize your own fundraiser for us. Ask us to come do a workshop. I do guest lectures for medical students through the American Medical Student Association, or AMSA, for medical and nursing students who are on the reproductive health track. So I have a curriculum. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to come do a workshop. That's how you can support us, is allowing us to share our perspective on reproductive health.
I love that. And this year is obviously a very big year for 18 by Vote. It is a big election year, and so not only if you want to contribute or support, you can go to our website, which is 18byvote.org. But we also have we're going to have a lot of volunteer opportunities coming up with ways that people can get involved in activating young people, activating your own community, and also activating just everyone in your life. I think that's the big thing for me this year. Is it's not just about young people. It's not just about people who maybe are more consumed with the idea or the daunting idea of the future, but it really is up to all of us to make change. So get involved in the things that matter to you, but also in the election and through the lens of the things that matter to you is the thing that I would say.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for that amazing conversation. If people have questions, which I'm sure they have, you can always just approach Ava and Rachel at the reception we'll have after this. We're getting closer to kind of the high point of this, the climactic point of this event. And for that, I'm going to introduce briefly Neal Rosenstein of the Puffin Foundation. Neal is the president of the Puffin Foundation, and Puffin is an amazing organization that I'm surprised how few people really know about it. Puffin does a lot of really good work, but is not an organization to put itself in the spotlight. But they've worked for many, many years with all kinds of progressive outfits in this country, supporting the arts, supporting journalism, supporting youth journalism, supporting political activism of all kinds. And Perry Rosenstein was has been a supporter, was a supporter of ALBA for many, many, many years. It is no exaggeration to say that there's very few things that we're doing today that we would be able to do if it hadn't been for the early and consistent support of the Puffin Foundation out of New Jersey. So we're just incredibly grateful for the visionary and generous support of the Puffin Foundation for the work that we do and for all the other ways in which they support progressive work here in the United States, which is a country with such an amazing progressive tradition that nevertheless sometimes spawns other things as well. And I don't know why it does that, but we have to keep fighting against it. So please help me welcome Neal Rosenstein of the Puffin Foundation.
I am so embarrassed to be up here after the folks we just heard from. And what they say, so eloquent, and you know, what we do at the foundation is really easy. And it's the work of the activists and organizers and educators of the world. Those are the folks who really deserve a lot of the applause, which they've already got, at least this evening. But I want to start, I want to thank Sebastian, I want to thank Kate, Dennis, the staff of ALBA, Mark, Jack, and everyone for putting this event together. It's just fantastic. On behalf of Puffin and Gladys, who can't be here today, we want to thank you. And it is so wonderful to see this outpouring of support, and especially of past awardees who are here this evening. I think it's exactly what's needed, that intersectionality, that supporting each other, that creating communities, and that's one of the ideas and hopes for the award, and we're really happy to see that it took place. 230 or so years ago, the founding white male fathers of this country did not put voting rights, universal voting rights, into the Constitution, right? They left it up to the states. And if you were a white male landowner, you know, you did pretty well under that system. And since that time, we've had a history of struggle to recognize what should be that right to vote and for participation in this country. It's taken us, not the only reason, certainly, reason through a civil war, women's suffrage in the 20s, the Voting Rights Act in the 60s. We can look in 72, finally 18-year-olds getting the right to vote in the face of the Vietnam War, and yet there are still barriers. Voter registration is almost a unique administrative barrier in Western industrialized democracies in the entire world. We didn't really even have registration. It wasn't necessary until we had waves of immigration into this country at the turn of the 1900s and after the Civil War. You go to any other country in Europe, you go to Australia, and I'm sure a lot of other countries, but what we consider those Western industrialized democracies, you're a citizen. That is your right to vote. And we're still dealing with those barriers to this day. And that's the reason that we're recognizing, and that it's a shame that we have to recognize organizations like 18 by vote. It's not a shame that we're recognizing you, but it's a shame that we have to. We had literacy tests in New York City. Forget the south of the Mason-Dixon line, crap. We had them in New York City into the 1960s. Because, anyone guess what group was coming over into New York in huge numbers in the 1960s that they decided, oh yeah, we better have literacy tests? Exactly. Puerto Ricans. When I was a student at SUNY Purchase in the 80s, we tried to register to vote from our college community, patriotic Americans that we were. A couple of us brought down some forms to the Board of Elections in Westchester, and they said, well, fine. So we registered about 800 of the 1,000 students who lived on campus, and they freaked out. They told those students, oh, no. You can't decide where your primary residence is, your locus of primary concern. They told that to students they said, go back and vote with your parents. That's what they said. They told that to students whose parents were dead. They told that to students whose parents didn't live in the country. They told that to, it was crazy. And we sued, and we won, thanks to the New York Civil Liberties Union. That won it. But I bring that up to the point that even in the 80s, students and voting rights still under attack in a state that we consider as enlightened as New York. We just lost Election Day registration amendment to the state constitution here in New York a few years ago. It went down in flames, right? And that is a real shame. And that's the reason why we really wanted to look at voting rights, besides this being an important election year. And the notion that so many of the rights that we take for granted are under attack. And we looked at students and youth, because who else besides it's their future? You look at students and youth, they put at the forefront, forget the last 10 years, forget the last 10 days. Parkland, the gun control walkouts, the recent environmental movement and the Sunrise Movement, Black Lives Matter, the war right now, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, issue after issue. It's been young people and youth that have led the way. They can have... And about, is it 80 years ago or so? It was the Gen Zers of the 30s, the average age being about 24, I was told by Spatchen, eminent scholar. The average age of the American volunteers who went to Spain to fight in Abraham Lincoln brigades, the Gen Zers of the 30s, right? And we're honoring today, 18 by vote, are the Gen Zers of today. Run by the Gen Zers today, activating the Gen Zers of today in the hope of a better tomorrow. And since that moment for me, back in, it was the 80s, when as a college student, I was part of that lawsuit at my campus, SUNY Purchase. I've been involved 40 years in voting rights and also college rights. It's a struggle that goes on today. And I am in awe of Ava, in awe of what I heard today. So certain that the right choice was made, and so proud that we're able to make this award today. So I think at this point in time, I'm supposed to invite Ava.
Thank you so much, Neal. And I want to start. I always say this actually to the young people that I work with. I wish we didn't have to do this work, particularly the voter registration part of this work. I think that we are a youth voting organization. We really heavily focus on youth leadership within that space. But I always say and kind of always support young people in thinking about what could the world look like if we didn't have to do that, and it is possible. But I am so deeply honored to be here today to accept this award on behalf of my organization, 18 by Vote, and all of the young people who have made the commitment to fight for our democracy. Young people are angry, they're frustrated. Many of them feel that our politicians are not listening to us and to them. And many people feel that their voices do not make a difference in our system of democracy. But after spending the past 3 years at the helm of an entirely youth-led organization that catalyzes youth civic engagement during and beyond elections, I am hopeful. I really do believe in our collective future. The most effective way to get young people to vote is through peer-to-peer education. And what's so interesting actually is that it's not just about, it's actually not just about the registering to vote. And I always, I go, when we do voter registration in communities, and I've done them in my own community in Brooklyn, where I go and I'm in a park and I'm approaching young people as they go by and asking them to register to vote. What I actually talk to them about in terms of voter registration is that's the first step. That's how you start. And that's where you need to start, and that puts the power into your own hands. But at 18 by Vote, we really cultivate leadership among youth who live in communities that have little to no access to civic engagement and provide paid opportunities where young people are supported in activating their peers through really hyper-localized community events. We really want young people to be connected to their peers. And that is the way that they are going to get to the polls. But as a youth-led organization, we are continually adapting to the needs of our generation, and this year is really a year to do that. That is also the beauty of us being by youth and for youth. We have an adaptability that is unique. My directors are actually college and high school students, and they really know how to reach their peers. I am no longer in that space, and I listen to them. They know how to connect, and it is so critical. And what they've told me this year, and what I've heard and listened to from the young people that are in our community, is that we need to be inspired. As always, the tools, the resources, the actual voter registration forms themselves are critical, but having conversations about the possibility for creating and advocating for change within our democracy is necessary. Unlike generations of the past, who not always, but many times voted because it was their civic duty, Gen Z needs motivation to utilize one of the core tenets of our democracy. And so, with the timely support of the ALBA Puffin Human Rights Activism Award, what I'm so excited to say is that we're really able to scale our programming this year to reach young people across the nation with a really big emphasis on states and districts and communities where youth voters could see the impact of their vote. They can see where, they have the possibility to determine election outcomes, and that is critical in our strategy as an organization. It is so meaningful to be recognized by the Puffin Foundation and ALBA, ALBA being an organization that is utilizing the legacy of the Abraham Lincoln Brigades to champion and support human rights activism as young people continually look forward. At 18 by Vote, as I was sharing, we know that we must learn from the past to learn how to make transformative change today, and also have that belief that change can happen. I would like to thank my parents, my friends, my family, and the 18 by Vote Board of Directors, as one of who is here today, for believing in me and for believing in the power of young people. To the ALBA and to the Puffin Foundation, I'm so unbelievably grateful for your investment and commitment to uplifting and amplifying youth voices. We need to come together. We need to come together to reimagine. We need to commit to creating and believing in change, and collectively building and maintaining a better world. I personally am driven by a vision of a democracy where youth voices are heard, and that requires continuous political action, not limited to high-profile election years. So at 18 by Vote, we are committed and continue to be committed to inspiring youth civic action, again, during and beyond elections. When people face hopelessness or disconnection, as is happening now and has happened over several years, and throughout history, we really have to look to each other. We have to encourage one another to envision our future the way that we want it. And what I say, and what I will continue to say, is that we must shout, we must write, we must vote, but we also really need to maintain our hope. So thank you so much.
Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives and the Puffin Foundation Limited proudly grant the 14th ALBA Puffin Award for Human Rights Activism to 18 by Vote. Recognition of their work to create sustainable civic leadership among young people who have been historically excluded from positions of leadership and power.
Now to close us out, I'm going to invite Maria Hernandez Ojeda, Professor at Hunter College and Vice Chair of the ALBA Board, for a final word. Please help me welcome Maria.
Thank you everyone. What a moving and beautiful ceremony. You agree with me, right? It was so powerful. So thank you everyone who participated and all of you for attending. And we want to especially thank the Human Rights Committee for their wonderful work. Jack Meyerhofer, Josie Urek, Cynthia Young, Paco Dionis, who's here, Gina Herman, and Peter Carroll. So thank you all for, again, doing this wonderful work. So we are inspired by the work that these organizations do every day to fight injustice, hate, and oppression. And in preserving the legacy of the Lincoln Brigade, ALBA continues to work for its mission, teaching history, inspiring activism, and upholding human rights. So thank you, everybody. And now, please join us at the reception in the back. And thank you again. Bye.
I think that the most inspiring thing that you can ever engage in or kind of learn about is learning how change has happened in the past, and in particular the young people who have been the catalysts for that change. And I think that's with the brigades, that was what it was. It was 24-year-olds. It was, you know, young people who were going out risking their lives to fight fascism. But I overall hope for a better, more equitable world where the human condition is positive, is continually improving and growing, and people are finding aspects of fulfillment in their own ways and continuing to imagine and question the way that we exist in this world that we live in. Absolutely, I am so grateful and appreciative and honored to be recognized by ALBA and by the Puffin Foundation for all of to be a part of a community and to be part of organizations that are making a stand for human rights and for human rights activism is truly an honor for me, and I am so grateful.
When you do get an award like this, you do feel seen. You do feel like all of a sudden now someone knows who we are. So much for me that I find myself educating others about ALBA. I just gave a whole talk around what ALBA does in San Francisco at Gilead Pharmaceuticals. You're working with ALBA at this particular point, and the Puffin Foundation. So it's just amazing to have this combination of two organizations together, and they're reaching out to everyone and making such a difference. You only hear about the bad things. You never hear about the people who stood up for you and who are still around. We only get the NAACP, but we never. Who knew ALBA was a part of this? So yeah, I think that the legacy is here and it's going to grow. In particular, if I have anything to do about it, I'm going to make sure people know who ALBA is and what they do and how they cater to the right thing. That they will always be on the right side of history. Always.